Welcome back. It's certainly the big story heading into this work week. The 15th BRICS Summit, which is going to be hosted by South Africa, will kick off this Tuesday with heads of state from member countries set to meet over 3 days. Now, some of the items on the agenda, we're told, are other countries potentially joining BRICS, as well as the establishment of some kind of common currency. Let's get you a sense of what else to expect with Associate Professor of African Politics at UNISA, that's Everisto Benyera, who joins us via our video link today. Great to have you on the program as always, sir. Thanks very much indeed for making time. And so much being said, of course, about BRICS. The drama around Vladimir Putin seems to be behind us. But I wonder whether you have some kind of checklist with you as we approach Tuesday to help you gauge whether or not this will be a successful summit.
This is, good morning to you and to the viewers and to the listeners. This is a very high-stakes meeting. We saw other members that you would not ordinarily expect to want to be part of this, clamoring to be there. France is one of them. The United States has been doing a lot of groundwork in terms of trying to have a hold on some BRICS members. Hence, others are saying the success of the BRICS hinders on the choice of India, whether it will come to BRICS or whether it will remain with the United States. So in terms of the checklist that you spoke about, the agenda is there, the delegates are there, the enthusiasm is there, the problems to be solved are there. And for me, the success of this BRICS conference is not on how it goes, but on how it will implement its resolution. We all await the final communique and the various points that they will say, we intend to achieve this by this time. We intend to have a common currency by this time. Only that will we then begin to grapple with the global reaction to the outcome of this BRICS summit.
Yeah, I think many of us will be naive to believe that this particular meeting will solve all the problems that exist within the bloc. But as far as you're concerned, which of these issues simply cannot be ignored this coming week?
One of the topical issues that is bringing many countries together here is the issue of the hegemonic United States dollar, which has ceased to be a financial currency, but has mutated into various forms, such as an instrument of diplomacy, an instrument of foreign policy, an instrument of punishment. The United States has used its currency for various national interest purposes. It can simply sanction a country. It can simply devalue the currency of another country. Look, whatever happens in Wall Street affects the whole world. The interest rates in the whole world depend on what the United States equivalence of the Monetary Policy Committee says. So the world is now wary of that if you happen to be on the wrong side of the United States or its allies, you can be punished, not through war, but through financial sanctions. The lessons that the world has learned from how Russian assets were frozen, on how Russia was financially punished by the United States and its allies, has hastened the desire to have alternatives to the United States dollar. Yeah. However, it is not going to be very easy to replace the United States dollar, because it did not just assume that position by default. It was a product of war. So you have to literally fight for these dominant positions in global politics. So I do not see any currency emerging, dislodging the United States without a major confrontation occurring. Some are saying the current war between Russia and Ukraine has got the likelihood of producing such an outcome that there will be an alternative currency. But as of now, I see the United States dollar continuing to be the de facto global currency.
Yeah, and the de-dollarization discussion becoming a major social-political hot potato. But outside of the resistance that we all know is going to come if this process is actually implemented, I wonder if you reckon there's any currency that stands a chance to replace the dollar, especially within the BRICS bloc.
Right from the founding fathers of African independence, such as Kwame Nkrumah, Sékou Touré, Sédar Senghor, there was this talk about an African currency that is gold-backed, that we have the gold in Africa, we have the population, we have the resolve to have a United States of Africa that is backed by a gold, by actual gold bullion or silver or any other precious metal that is found in Africa. So for me, the alternative currency that has to have resonance without the backing of an economy, whether it is the Chinese economy, the Russian economy, or the combined BRICS economies, would be gold itself. There is more clarity in the world going back to the gold standard as the gold reserve currency for the world, as opposed to using a currency such as the rupee or the yuan or the Japanese yen. I think there will be huge problems simply because the economies where these currencies come from are not as secure as that of the United States. Yeah. These economies could be bigger in terms of GDP, gross national product, and so on and so on. But in terms of security, the United States remains the strongest individually or collectively. So the actual alternative in my reading of African politics and global politics would be gold itself. Some say that is exactly what the late Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was arguing for, that in order for Africa to be united, the first and easiest, the lowest hanging fruit is for us to use our gold as a trading currency among ourselves. Then that would spread to the whole globe. I do not have enough hope in any other currency emerging and dislodging the United States dollar.
That's interesting. Speaking about going back, by the way, when the idea of BRICS was conceived, it was meant to be this kind of alternative from the West around the EU's influence. You spoke about the US hegemony over the world. If this bloc is to keep true to the mandates that it had set out for itself from the beginning, who should it allow and disallow from joining the bloc? Because we also understand that this is another major issue heading into Tuesday's summit.
Without a generally agreed upon ideology, it's very difficult to galvanize among the hatred of the United States. Coming together because they've got a common enemy is good, but coming together because you've got a better, well-articulated alternative is even better. So what the BRICS currents need to do is to allow the original members to design an entry criteria that says, if you want to join us as a member of BRICS, this is what we expect from you. And one of those things would be to design a roadmap for the formation of a BRICS free trade area, a BRICS customs area, a BRICS currency, and on top of that, without real power, as long as the alpha currency in global politics remains military power. Without military power, BRICS will remain more of a diplomatic bloc than a real force to be reckoned with. And this will also help ameliorate the problem of members who have dual relationships. Right now, India is so close to the United States. Narendra Modi was there recently. One of their nationals is leading the World Trade Organization. I think one is also at the International Monetary Fund. And then India needs to decide and say, we are with the West or we are with the BRICS. It cannot be with both and please both. Time will come where India has to choose and say, I am with the BRICS or I am with India. And these are just some of the problems that come out of coming together for something that you have not yet clearly articulated, that as BRICS, these are our objectives. This is how we are going to establish those BRICS. Because even the Secretariat itself, it's not that strong. If you compare it to other blocs like the European Union, they moved very fast, they consolidated, they had a parliament, they had all these standard operating procedures, if we may simplify them that way. BRICS does not as yet have them. Countries are still having an interest in preserving their national interest. So the kind of sovereignty that they are surrendering to the BRICS is not the whole sovereignty. They are holding back a bit to see how this thing pans out.
Speaking about choices that need to be made, let's speak about South Africa's positionality in this. I mean, you spoke about some kind of BRICS free trade area that's needed. South Africa is also involved in discussions around the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, which speaks more to the continent. Do you envision a scenario where South Africa is also going to have to make very serious decisions about which allegiance it's swearing to, either to the AfCTA, I mean the Africa Free Continental Trade Area, or to this free trade area as you envision in BRICS?
This is not a position that is peculiar to South Africa. It is a problem that haunts Africa. If you take the Democratic Republic of Congo, it is an archetype country that belongs to multiple regional cooperation groupings. And the problem that comes out is, if there is a problem in the Congo, whose problem is it? Does it belong to the East African community? Does it belong to SADC? South Africa right now is a member of SACU, which is historically and currently very problem and very functioning. South Africa is getting into this and even leading the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. However, there is also an EU-South Africa partnership agreement. So there are these multiple relationships, if I may simplify them that way, that South Africa entered into. And that complicates things not only for South Africa, but for the continent, because South Africa is viewed as a gateway to Africa. So if South Africa is not that decisive as to how it is going to partner who in its agenda to become a developmental state that becomes a world-leading economy within the next 50 years, you see, if everything is a priority, then nothing becomes a priority. South Africa needs to align its national ideology with its international relations and say, we are now pro-South-South. We will only engage with other partners if we agree within the South-South framework to go and do that. Because as of now, the challenge is that going it alone as South Africa to the EU, as South Africa to the United States, and by the way, as Cape Town negotiating, the Northwest negotiating with the United States, that creates a lot of layers. These layers are not synchronized, they are not in tandem, and they end up creating a lot of internal cohesion, which then translates as, what do we do with President Putin if President Putin arrives? Some say we are going to arrest him, some say he will walk free. So it creates a lot of internal political turbulence, which then distracts from the greater good of pursuing the developmental agenda, because you do not know who exactly your partner is. If we discover lithium today in South Africa, who are we going to partner? Is it the EU? Is it the US? Is it China through FOCAC? Or is it China through BRICS? So there are a lot of relationships that need to be streamlined. Some of them need to be repackaged and repurposed, because I understand that abandoning them can have a lot of political consequences.
Absolutely. And the point you've just made drives home the idea that domestic politics inevitably always bleed into these multilateral global politics also at play. Professor Everisto Benyera, always a pleasure. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. As you've said, the stakes are high leading up to Tuesday.